Boulder River Canyon area is located 30 miles south of Big Timber and is accessible by Blacktop Road. Over 70,000 persons visited the 260,000-acre area last year. The expanse of wild country beyond the point where the road ends is currently being studied for inclusion in a wilderness area. But the beginning of our trip was at the entrance to the National Forest, where Head Ranger Tom Ellis described the view that greets forest visitors.
On the ridge before us is the lion, the mouse. It's a configuration in the sandstone of a lion's head with a formation of what would be a mouse just below it. So it's like a crouching lion just about ready to jump on the mouse.
Now, would you say this is one of the landmarks of this area?
That's right. This is the main feature right at this point as you come into the canyon, and it's quite a point for photographers to film from this point.
Tom, how far up the canyon can we go from this point by vehicle?
You can go about 20 miles of maintained road. This is graded forest access road, and from this point is about 6 or 7 miles more of jeep trail to the old ghost town of Independence.
Not far up the canyon is the 92-foot falls of the Boulder River. The view from the east side of the river is spectacular as you look up the river towards the falls. The Forest Service plans extensive development of the area around the falls when the funds become available. Included in the plans would be a bridge over the falls and a trail system around the falls. There would also be interpretive signs, sanitary facilities, and parking space for about 60 cars. During low water, there is a natural bridge across the river just above the falls. However, few visitors get to see this phenomena of nature. Because of underground springs, it is said that more water runs beneath the falls than goes over at the point where the river drops into the gorge 92 feet below. Continuing up the canyon, you soon come to the main ranger station, which has an interesting history, as related by Ranger Ellis.
This station was built in 1905, the first year the Forest Service was created. And it's one of the oldest stations in the United States as far as the Forest Service field stations are concerned. And the ranger, when he retired here, Harry Kaufman, he retired in 1940, and he was the oldest ranger in point of service in the history of the Forest Service. And our plans are to convert this into the Boulder River Museum. It sits here at the mouth of the canyon just above the natural bridge and falls. And on the ridge to the west are the Indian caves, and across the river are the battlements which were put up by the 5th Infantry in the Bannock Indian War. So this will kind of be a visitor information stop for the whole drainage, and we want to tell the story of the Forest Service, the early days, and explain the battlement story, the Indian caves, and the story of the old ghost town of Independence.
Across the river from the ranger station is another area of interest, which is also described by Ellis.
Just across the river on this little timbered knob are some battlements that were entrenchments that were put up by the 5th Infantry during the Bannock Indian Wars. Now, this isn't Chief Joseph. This is the Bannock Indian Wars, and they were put up by the 5th Infantry to try to keep the Bannock Indians from entering the Yellowstone Valley. Lieutenant Bailey, with 25 men under General Miles, manned this portion of the Boulder River in anticipation of the Indians coming down the Boulder and into the Yellowstone.
You don't have to be in the canyon very long before you learn that it's a very popular recreation area. During the summer season, especially on weekends, the campgrounds become quite crowded, attracting area residents as well as many tourists. There are several campgrounds scattered all along the canyon. Most of them are well developed with sanitary facilities, picnic tables, and cooking grates. There are also areas which are designated for picnicking only, and camping is not allowed in these areas. The Forest Service is continually attempting to upgrade existing facilities and hopes to add new ones in time to come. Summer homes are scattered throughout the canyon, and they range from simple log structures to quite elegant homes. No matter what you desire in the way of outdoor recreation, the Boulder River area no doubt can provide it. The Boulder is a fine fishing stream. The area boasts a large number of mule deer for the hunters, and of course there is always camping and pack trips into the backcountry. During the summer season, there are several commercial outfitters who specialize in trips into the primitive areas of the forest. These trips can include fishing in high mountain lakes and photography of some of the most beautiful mountain country in North America. The packers also work into the fall season when they guide hopeful hunters into the mountains in hopes that they may bag deer, elk, mountain sheep or goats, or a bear. Ranger Ellis talked about the importance of the canyon area as a winter game range and about other wildlife native to the area.
How important is this area as far as a winter range for big game animals?
On the Boulder River bottom here, we have about 60 to 70 elk winter, and it isn't really typical elk winter range because it is fairly deep snow country, but we try to keep this area around Clydehurst for the elk. We have quite a bit of pressure from commercial outfitters and recreationists that want to put their horses in this area and graze. We also have domestic livestock trailing up to the summer ranges and back. And there's a tendency to use this area because it's here, the grass is here, and they want to use it. Well, no, they don't think that when the wintertime comes, we have 70 head of elk come in here for 6 months and stay in this area in winter. And we try to leave this good range, which we see here, for the elk to winter on. If we don't think of the elk, and no one's going to.
Well, what about other big game animals, deer, sheep, mountain goats, this type?
Well, this is quite an area, and we have quite an extensive mule deer herd, and they winter for the most part on the lower end of the drainage and on the private land adjacent to the forest. The forest provides most of the summer, spring, and fall range. As far as mountain sheep are concerned, there have been sheep shot in the upper end of the drainage. There are permits issued. There aren't too many up in this area. We have 2 or 3 come out every year. As far as mountain goats, there are mountain goats on the ridges on both sides of the drainage and up at the upper end. But again, the population isn't too great, but we do have a significant harvest every year. We have black bear in the drainage. They're quite apparent. We have them on a Monday morning after a busy weekend in our campground. They kind of tip over our garbage cans, but they aren't grizzly. They're black bear, and we haven't had a grizzly bear sighting in the drainage in over 10 years.
For the person who would rather fish than hunt, the Boulder is the place to go. The Fish and Game Department regularly stocks the river with trout, as was done the weekend we visited the canyon. Ed Furnish and Tom Morgan drove from the fish hatchery at Lewistown to plant several hundred trout. This was quite an interesting operation to observe, and we talked with Furnish about the planting of the fish.
Ed, what kind of a program does the Fish and Game Department have for fish planting on the Boulder?
Well, most of the fish that are planted in the upper Boulder are all eagle-sized fish. In other words, this upper Boulder, the water is quite barren. There isn't too much feed in it, so they usually wait until after high water to plant the fish.
And how often is this done?
We'll start from now on until probably middle of September.
And how many times? How regular is this done?
Oh, we'll make about 7 or 8 trips with this truck full.
And you had 600 fish in here
We'll
today.
have about 15,000 eagle-sized fish for the upper Boulder.
Planted this year?
This year, yes.
Where are these fish raised, Ed?
These fish are raised at Lewistown.
Now, it's not, of course, the only hatchery in the state, is it?
No, it isn't. We have 7 other hatcheries in the state.
But this one serves this district, is that
We
right?
plant the upper Boulder and the Boulder River, and well, we plant a big portion of Montana out of Lewistown.
Now, an interesting question. These fish are raised in a hatchery and fed regularly, I would assume. Now, what happens when they get in a river like this? What changes take place?
Well, it's quite an adjustment for them to make, especially at this size. But most of these fish in this upper Boulder will be caught during this season. That's the reason that we're planting them at this time of the year. They do have a carryover in the upper Boulder, but the fish, they don't get much bigger than they were when they were planted, actually.
Big timber banker John Ronneberg wanted to show us just how easy it was to catch a trout in the Boulder. John had come prepared to display his skills with rod and reel, and it didn't take him long to come up with a fish. By the way, John did his fishing on Saturday, the day before the Fish and Game Department planted the 600 trout in the river. We mentioned this so as not to take away anything from John, who didn't waste any time getting a trout on the hook. However, after seeing the size of the fish, John decided to unhook it and put it back in the water to put on a little more weight. These Big Timber area residents are used to catching large fish and don't ordinarily settle for anything less. As you drive through the canyon, you are sometimes awed by the majestic mountains and the scenery around you, which almost defies description. At any time during the trip, and at almost any time of the day, you may see wildlife. Photographer Pete Schmidt captured on film a doe deer and 3 fawns, which were lying in the grass off the side of the road down a steep bank. Game biologist Floyd Gordon said the doe apparently was babysitting because the deer rarely have more than 2 fawns. Well, the little guy finally got to his feet and slipped away into the trees on less than sturdy legs. Because we didn't get into the backcountry, we saw only deer on the trip. But there are also several other species of big game animals in the canyon area. A point of interest which few people probably see is a grave site several miles up the canyon. The grave is marked by stones and is just off the side of the road. Ranger Ellis explained that the grave is that of a miner who worked in the canyon when gold mines flourished in the late 1800s. According to the story, the miner had overindulged on some local brew, and while driving his wagon up the canyon, came upon a rattlesnake. In his drunken stupor, the miner was bitten several times by the snake and died as a result of the infectious poison. There are several church camps in the canyon, and one of the largest is a United Methodist Church camp. Located several miles up the canyon, it has a church which will seat 500 persons. The dormitories are spread throughout the expansive area which surrounds the church. The church camps were just opening for the summer when we were there, and before the summer is out, several thousand young people will visit their respective church camp. The last several miles of the trip up the boulder is by 4-wheel drive vehicle, although some people do manage to get cars into the area. How they do it is beyond most people because the road is far from good. At the end of the road is what remains of the old mining town of Independence.
We're now at the town site of Independence, which was a mining town of the late 1800s. Tom, what is some of the history of this community?
Well, this country, there was about $30 million worth of gold came out of this country, and there was about over 2,000 people lived here at one time. They took the gold from the mine up above us to the left, up what's in the vicinity of what's now called the Yeager mine, and they brought it down with wagons to the concentrator, which is lies right directly in front of us. And they had a stamp mill there, and they crushed the ore, and they concentrated it, and they put it on wagons, and they freighted it down the 30 miles to the Main Boulder, down the Main Boulder, and then in the Big Timber.
Well, Tom, how far can we go from here up this trail, which has been 4-wheel drive for the last several miles?
Well, there's a trail system that takes off from this area and goes up to the very head of the boulder over Independence Pass and down to what they call Buffalo Drainage, which leads into the park. And you can go to the east, and you can continue on the Jeep Road to the east about 7 or 8 more miles into what's called Slough Creek. There's a trail system there that goes down into what they call Frenchie's Meadows and the Silvertip Ranch, and then in the Yellowstone Park. And you can also go up Sheep Creek to the west, over Sheep Creek Divide, and down in what they call Hell Roaring, which in turn goes into the park. We have plans for this area. We're planning to make this what we will call a 4-wheel drive area, the Independence 4-wheel drive area. And we'll have these Jeep trails where they won't do any damage to the resource as far as the watershed is concerned. We'll have some historical interpretation of the town of Independence. There will be some sanitary facilities up at Blue Lake, which you can Jeep into. And this fish hatchery in Big Timber, State Fish and Game Hatchery in Big Timber, stocks the lake. And this Jeep trail will also take you up on what we call the Lake City Plateau, which is about 9,000-foot plateau, which gives you spectacular views of the Beartooth Range, Pilot and Index Peak, Granite Peak, and looking down south towards Yellowstone Park.
It is the expanse of mountains and valleys beyond the head wall of the canyon at Independence which is becoming controversial. Some interest groups would like to see the 200,000 acres put into a wilderness area, while others want it left as it is. A committee of interested persons has been formed in Big Timber to study the proposed wilderness idea, and grocery store owner Tom Findley is a member of the committee. We talked both with Ranger Ellis and Findley about the wilderness proposal.
We understand, Tom, that a portion of this area is being studied as a possible wilderness area. Could you explain the definition of a wilderness area?
Well, essentially, a wilderness area is an area that has been as untrammeled by man. Man is a visitor; he doesn't remain. This is an area that is natural in character and has not been disturbed by man. Now, as we think about a wilderness area, we have two primitive areas south of us here: the Beartooth and the Circa primitive area. Now, these areas have to be studied under the Wilderness Act, 1964. They have to be studied for possible inclusion in the National Wilderness Preservation System. So we are studying these areas in the next 2 or 3 years. We're going to inventory all the resources and study these areas in relation to wilderness. Now, these other resources we're going to study is the timber resource, the range resource, the water resource, the recreation resource, and of course the wilderness resource. And from our study, we hope to come up with a proposal that will be accepted by most of the people using the area and most of the local communities around this area. Now, one of the things that we're doing is we're trying to inform the people that we are studying this area, and we ask if anybody has any comments, any organizations that are interested in this particular study, if they would contact us and let us know. We'd be glad to come down and talk to the groups and inform them what we're doing. And the only way we can get an area that is acceptable to the majority of the people is to hear from the people. And this is what we're beginning to do now, is inform the people of our study, collect our data, and try to come up with a wilderness area that will be good for all the people for perpetuity.
Are there those who oppose the plan to make this a wilderness area, and if so, why?
There are many users of the National Forest, not just one interest group. We have the lumber industry, which depends on National Forest timber to supply lumber to the mills. We also have domestic livestock or ranchers that depend on the National Forest for their summer grazing. We also have recreationists, not just people who like to hike and ride horseback in the backcountry. We also have people that enjoy riding motor scooters on the National Forest. We also have people that like to run snowmobiles in the National Forest in the wintertime. We also have people who like to have four-wheel drives and go in the backcountry and see some of this beautiful country we have. We also have areas that possibly could be scenic highways or more developed as years go on. We also have the biggest resource, I feel, in the National Forest is our watershed. And as the population increases in the United States, the demand for water is going to be tremendous. And we've just begun to think about actual manipulation of our watersheds to increase the flow of water and the time of the flow of water. And there's many possibilities in this particular country. So it's essential that we inventory all these resources that we have, and we come up with a plan that will take care of the needs of the majority of the people. And consequently, this is the magnitude of the task, as far as we're concerned, is tremendous, because we have this largest wild area left in North America, and it's all remote backcountry area, and we have to go into this area and determine what our resources are. I think when we come up with a plan, if we hear from the people and the organizations and the various interest groups, that we can tie in our resource information with the people's opinions and come up with a plan and a management plan for this area, which will include wilderness, will include timber areas, watershed areas, recreation areas, and we try to provide these necessary services that the people of the United States desire. And this is our job, is to manage the National Forest for the people.
Does the committee have an opinion on the wilderness area, and if so, what is it, Tom?
No, the committee, as a committee, does not have a stand on this. Our job is to find the consensus of the opinion of the people in this area and to pass this on to the Forest Service and to the Congress of the United States at the time that is necessary.
Well, as individual members, do some of the committee members have opinions?
We definitely do.
Well, how about yourself? Are you in favor generally or opposed to this plan?
I'm in favor of wilderness to a certain extent. However, I feel that possibly there is a limit to how much wilderness we need. After all, the wilderness area is an area that is to be left untrammeled by man. Consequently, its use by man is going to be greatly curtailed. Therefore, we feel that perhaps we have enough wilderness that an increase of our wilderness area would curtail the use of this area to the majority of the people.
Well, what group or individuals are supporting the plan to make this a wilderness area?
The Sierra Club and the Montana Wilderness Association are probably the two main organizations.
Now, is the Sierra Club a national organization?
It is.
And are these people primarily the hikers and those who go into the backcountry?
That is my understanding, that they're the people that like to get solitude, which they will receive in a wilderness area.
Well, then basically your position individually, maybe some of the other committee members, is that a portion of a given national forest area should be wilderness area, but then you have to have that which is accessible to the general public, four-wheel drive vehicles and so on.
That is correct. The majority of the people don't have the time or the inclination, or possibly for health reasons are unable to traverse this wilderness area. Consequently, we have to keep areas open that the majority of the people can enjoy. They also enjoy the solitude and the beauty of this country.
So what happens in the Big Timber District of the Gallatin National Forest could have nationwide impact as far as future wilderness areas are concerned. We have attempted to explore the many aspects of the canyon area which must be considered in making this decision.